Welcome to Pathways, a career podcast from the Idaho State University Career Center. I'm your host, Mark Beaver. Today, we're speaking with Dr. Paul Bodily, Assistant Professor of Computer Science at Idaho State University. Paul is involved in some extremely fascinating research, and just hearing about that alone is worth the listen. But on a career perspective, it's also interesting to hear how he got into this field. Like so many of our guests, it wasn't always so straightforward. Please join us for our conversation with Dr. Paul Bodily. Hey, Paul, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. How are you, Mark?
Good. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure. So
I've talked to quite a few professors on the show, so we kind of have an idea of the breakdown, the percentages of research, service, and teaching. Is your position any different in those breakdowns?
I'm not sure what you've heard elsewhere. Mine's about 60% teaching, 25 research, 15 service.
Okay.
Something like that.
So in the world of computer science, I guess, can you give us kind of a bird's eye view of maybe like some of the classes you teach, but also like a peek into like what does research in that field look like? What's some stuff that you've worked on?
Yeah. So computer science in general is all about programming, computer programming, software engineering. My emphasis, the classes that I teach are more in algorithms, and I do some machine learning and artificial intelligence. For example, some of my research looks at using machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms to try and teach computers how to be creative autonomously. I'm a musician. I'm really interested in the songwriting process and trying to understand it well enough that you could articulate to a computer how to do it by itself, for example.
Right.
So,
well, that's interesting. I've never really thought of like something like the songwriting process as being something almost so like mathematical. Is there, would that be?
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? Yeah. So it's a lot of probabilistic machine learning. So it allows for there to be some, what we call stochasticity or randomness, so that it doesn't feel quite so mathematical, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
What is that? Have you had any outcomes on that? Have you had a couple songs?
Right? Yeah. I've got a song. We're actually planning to submit it to the AI song contest this summer. It's and the computer came up with the lyrics, the melody, the rhythm, the harmony, everything. And it's an interesting little tune. It actually really kind of has an imposter syndrome theme to it, like the computer's questioning whether or not it really exists or like how capable it is to really think.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of meta. And
it is. And it was totally
And so you didn't, you
accident.
don't think that you had an influence on, I mean, you've had some influence on it.
I'm sure. The challenge in the field of what we call computational creativity is to minimize the creator's fingerprints, right?
Right.
When I say creator, I mean the meta creator, the programmer.
So, I mean, it's so interesting for me to kind of think about that, because to write a song, like for me, I don't know. I don't really write songs with lyrics. I mean, I do for like my kid and stuff, but like, a little melody, a little jingle comes in the head, then, maybe some words, maybe twist those around, get some better rhymes. But, if I really wanted to keep it, maybe write it down. But to have a computer do this process, what is that process? What are you doing to do that? I mean, for the layman.
Yes. So early on in my research, I remember one of the big questions asking myself was, when people write music, do they typically start with the chords, the harmony, or with the melody? And I remember Googling this several times, and the consensus that I came to was it varies.
Right,
it depends on people. Sometimes it's one, sometimes the other, and sometimes they come at the same time.
Right.
But for me personally as a songwriter, it was always the harmonies that really got me, and that I felt like the melody really was a product of the harmony. So I chose in the system that I built I use what are called sequence generation models, COV models, that are just basically a bunch of statistics to look at, how often does this note follow that note, and how often does this chord follow that chord. And so the model learns those probabilities from looking at a huge database of music, and it generates first a harmony line, and then it figures out okay, now I'm going to generate a melody line, but it has to fit within that harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And then the melody line, you kind of lay a rhythm on top of that, and then you find lyrics to match the rhythm. And that's how we started out. But going forward, I think one of the things we want to look at is, well, computers frankly are terrible with English, with natural language.
Okay.
That's where they're really weak.
Yeah.
They're okay at music, but they're really bad at natural language. But that's what humans are really good at.
Mm-hmm.
Even humans that aren't musicians are good with words. So my plan is to try and switch it around so that the words come first from the human, and then the computer has to adapt everything else to that.
Okay.
So.
And so what does it look like when you're doing this? You're typing code?
Typing code.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of machine learning models. I actually used some sequence alignment algorithms to try and figure out, okay, within a song, repetition is everywhere. Motifs, rhyme schemes, your ABA chorus, verse chorus structures, that's all repetitions. And so we use some algorithms that help the computer to be able to learn those patterns of repetition from existing music in order to create its own music that has some actual structure in it.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And these are all like really hardcore CS algorithms that do these things.
Right.
So it's very CSE,
right,
computer sciencey.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, one of the reasons why I often ask, or I ask you that question is I like to ask a lot of professors, like a little bit of what can you do with this degree? Like, what are some stuff? But I mean, that's completely fascinating. What are like some other just kind of interesting things kind of coming out? Maybe just a couple examples around your sphere that you're interested in computer science.
In my particular,
it doesn't have to be your research, but maybe just stuff that you're reading about that's intriguing to you, directions that this major could take.
Well, I mean, as you can imagine, computer science is the hot thing these days.
It's kind of unlimited, but I mean, what you're talking about to me is particularly interesting because I am much more of a kind of a creative. I call myself a creative brain person, and I'm not really interested in code. But where these things are meeting, that's very intriguing to me. So
there's a lot of subdomains within computer science. Cybersecurity is a really hot topic right now.
Yeah.
Bioinformatics is my background, so that's a cross between biology and computer science. Computer animation, self-driving cars, machine learning, and data science are across the board really hot right now. Artificial intelligence. Just in Idaho alone, they've got, I want to say it's like 2,000 jobs open for CS graduates. But one thing I really encourage students in my classes to do is to try and find a way to merge what it is that they're already passionate about with programming. I had a student that was on the basketball team a few years ago, and I thought, how cool would it be if the student could get in? There's already an app out there that helps you improve your basketball skills, but it uses machine learning to follow the ball and keeps track of when you score and helps improve your dribbling and all of that. So I'm of the opinion that there is always going to be a way for you to meld computer science with some other passion, and that's what you should do. Right. You have to be passionate about it.
Yeah, I mean, especially going forward in our society, for sure. I mean, I can also, not to be too tangential, but I can see how that would really apply to coaching. Like a basketball or something too, kind of like
totally
applying it to, film of teams you're going to play, have some modeling, some specific possible outcomes, things like that. So how you're saying there's a lot of jobs. Obviously, it's wide open, but I think a lot of people might be. This is one of those kind of majors that students or just anybody might be really interested in because all this stuff is very interesting.
Yeah.
How hard is it to get into a program like this? What's kind of the skill set that you need to have on a technical level?
Yeah. So my background before, I didn't discover programming until I was a junior in college, actually. I'm not sure if that just says how old I am or what, but before that, I was very much into languages. I'd studied French and Japanese and Italian, and I really love languages. And programming is pretty much just another language. It happens to be a language that a computer can speak. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of different programming languages, but they actually are all very, very similar, at least the ones that are in vogue and in common usage. It draws on kind of logic and math, but you probably won't use math as much as you as you might think you would, unless you're doing some application of computer science in a field that, like physics simulations or something like that. What's the game with the bird that you, Flappy Bird?
Yeah, okay.
Flappy Bird game. Yeah, so a lot of games have physics, and there's math there, but programming in general is just learning a language, and it involves, beyond the syntactic element of learning like how the different pieces of the language fit together, there's the semantics of problem solving. How do you think about the solution to a problem in a way that can be articulated in that language? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think it might be considered a relatively steep learning curve, but it's addicting. It's the kind of thing where once you get a taste of it, you want more. I remember my first programming class. I had been a biologist before that, and my plan was to keep doing that unless I found something that I was really passionate about. And one thing I wanted to know was, how does a computer work? And so I took this beginning programming class, and it kicked my trash. It was hard. And I felt like an imposter, frankly. I felt like everyone was just sooner or later going to find out that I didn't know anything. But even from the first project, which in computer science, Hello World is always the first project. That's the program that you just print out, Hello World, and it shows that you indeed know how to run even the simplest of programs in that language. And just to see that printed on the screen and know that you wrote the program that did that is an aha moment, a light bulb moment. I've always likened it to crossword puzzles. I love crossword puzzles. And when you complete a crossword puzzle and it all just fits together perfectly, and you see all of the creativity that went into it, and it's just this beautiful result of so many, cool thoughts. It's very rewarding. And I really believe that even though it has a high learning curve, steep learning curve, that anyone can do it. And honestly, once you get past the first couple of years of the program, the difficulty kind of vanishes, and it just becomes a really fun, creative tool.
Right. Cool. So yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of, obviously you're pretty passionate about this world and what can go in it. So, I guess just like from a job perspective, what kind of gives you the most satisfaction on a day-to-day, the most fulfillment? What do you love about your job as it applies to your job?
Yeah. So I guess I see my job as computer science on one hand, but I'm also a professor and a teacher. So are you talking about more about the computer science side, or either, or what in particular?
Yeah, what's that? Yeah.
Because there's both. There's things I love about
Tell
both.
me about them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess since we've started talking about CS, we'll kind of keep going with that vein. Computer science as a field is in such high demand right now that you can kind of write your own ticket. You can work from home. You can work anywhere in any field. It pays well, good benefits, and it affords a good work-life balance. And honestly, that was one of the biggest things that drew me to computer science was I want to be a dad. I want to be my kid's soccer coach, actually basketball coach. I discovered I'm not a great soccer coach. And I want to be able to be home for the important events. So that was a big allure for me. As long as you get the work done by the time it needs to get done, it doesn't really matter when you're doing it.
Right.
So that's a big thing that I love about computer science. The other thing that I kind of tout about computer science is that in some fields, other STEM fields, in order to be creative, you have to have raw materials, right? You have to go buy circuits or wood or, I don't know, metal or whatever. But in programming, if you want to start a new project, all you do is open a new text window on your computer. There's really no cost to making mistakes or whatever. So there's a lot of great things about the field of programming, besides the fact that it boasts very high job satisfaction ratings.
Right.
People seem to really enjoy programming. Teaching, if I can talk to that for just a minute.
Sure, yeah, please.
I was really worried about when I got into computer science that my job would be me sitting behind a computer all day in some dark room in a basement.
And that's kind of where my mind goes a lot of times too.
Totally.
Right.
And I'm more of a people person. I need natural light. I need outdoors and stuff like that. And so I was worried about that. So I kind of intentionally steered my CS career in a direction that would allow me to interact more with people. And I'd actually had experience teaching Italian before I did any computer science. And I knew that I loved teaching. And so I love being, in particular, a college professor, working with students that are at that level of their education, that they're really excited about really engaging and preparing for their future and being able to talk about difficult topics. Being a professor is great also from the work-life balance aspect as well. So, yeah, there's a lot to tout.
Yeah.
There.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Dr. Paul Bodily, Assistant Professor of Computer Science at Idaho State University. So you've mentioned a couple times the work-life balance. And I mean, just in my life, it's as I've moved through many different jobs, it is something that I'm always have in mind, and how my values are shifting, and what type of job, what type of lifestyle is going to satisfy those values. So just for yourself, can you talk a little bit about your work-life balance and what this job gives you outside of this job?
Yeah, so my day-to-day as an assistant professor in computer science, I teach classes on Tuesdays, Thursdays. I have what's called a 2-2 load in academia, which means I teach 2 classes in the fall semester and 2 in the spring semester. And I have to make sure I'm prepared with lectures for those classes, and I have to prepare assignments and exams and things like that. But the only time that I really have to be somewhere is during that time that the class is scheduled. So that means that I'm generally free to drop my kids off at school. And for example, we just got a dog on yesterday.
Yesterday.
Never had a dog before.
Wow, yeah.
And I got to be the one to pick my kids up from school and take them home and watch them be there or watch them be surprised that they have a dog and everything.
It's a special moment.
It's yeah. And that's what I live for, That's totally what I live for. So having that flexibility is a big deal. I want to be able to know that I'm going to have weekends open to go camping and backpacking. And I'm the Cub Scout leader for my kids. And I think I mentioned I was my basketball coach for my son's basketball team. So I really work to live and not the other way around.
Right.
At the same time, it provides enough of a salary to be able to support my family in those extracurricular things. And I honestly feel like it's the best of all worlds, but I'm probably a little biased.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you say that you work to live, but I mean, you definitely sounded pretty exciting about the work. You excited about the work that you do as well, which is a nice perk. You'd also mentioned in that you're a musician. Is that a hobby? Or?
Yes. So there was a small window during college where I had to give up music and language learning altogether, foreign language learning. And it was like the light went out of my life. I feel like I really needed those passions. And there have been times during my career where it's been harder and easier to be able to pursue that. But last spring, I realized that I've been at ISU since 2018. And when you first start out as a professor, there's a lot to get used to. There's a lot of ramping up in terms of preparing course curricula and things like that. But I'd been here now for 3 years or so, and I hadn't done much with my music since coming to Pocatello. And so I said, it's time to get back to that. And I'm a singer-songwriter. I perform a lot of Billy Joel, Elton John kind of stuff. And I went down to a local restaurant and said, hey, I know you do live music. What do I got to do to get on your docket? And since then, I've been playing, maybe once a month or so. And I even found a group of guys to create a band. So we've got a little rock band with a drummer and bass and guitar. And so we rehearse once a week, and we're starting to play around town. And I live for that too, honestly. Yeah. And I'm glad that my career supports that.
Right.
And facilitates that.
Right.
Allows that.
Right. Like you were saying, not only do you have the flexibility to maybe, go play a little bit later one night and not have to worry about, being at the job site at 6 a.m. the next day. But also you don't have to depend on that for income to support the things that you want to do, to buy camping gear, to get out with the family, et cetera. I think that's such an important part of kind of what we factor into our careers is what else do I love?
Right.
Right. And how is this going to make space for that? How is it going to, as you said, support it and hold it up? Going back a little way, well, let's go back a long ways, but before we were talking, you said you had changed your major a few times, and then in this conversation, you said that you were in biology and have taught languages, et cetera. So can we go back, a question that I asked most of our guests, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, so my grandfather and my dad were both anesthesiologists, physicians, doctors, the helpful kind, as I like to put it. And that was my default. I figured I would just follow in their footsteps. I didn't really know anything else. So yeah, I thought I was going to be a doctor.
And that was just kind of from a young age. You just kind of saw the doctors going to work, and
I remember one time looking at my book of remembrance or whatever, or it's my dad's book actually, and it had one of his old report cards in it, and I saw where he had been at my age and where he was as my dad, as an adult, as a doctor. And I thought, okay, those are the grades I need to get, and that's the career I'm going to aim for. And that was kind of I always knew that I would be willing to do something else if something else presented itself that I felt more drawn to, more called to. But that was my default. That was my backup plan. I figured that was a pretty good backup plan.
How long did you hold that until? Did you enter college with that idea?
I was one organic chemistry class shy of finishing the pre-med requirements when I switched to computer science.
And that's just because you kind of had your mind blown and derailed you.
Yeah,
derailed's not the right word. Set you on a different track.
That's right. Yeah. So I started out freshman year as a math major. Pre-med doesn't necessitate that you do a particular degree. So I was going to do the pre-med requirements, but I had to get a bachelor's. So I looked at math. I looked at physiology and developmental biology. I looked at molecular biology. I looked at Italian. I looked at bioinformatics was what I finally ended up on, because as a junior, switching from biology into computer science, it was faster for me to just do
kind of integrate what you'd already had.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, switched directions a lot of times. I always had some reservations about being a physician, having to take call and, working nights and maybe having a little bit less of a reliable schedule. Being a physician seemed stressful. The, malpractice, insurance, liability. I had done a fair amount of job shadowing, and it seemed interesting, but it really wasn't necessarily, it didn't call to me per se. I think I really wanted to have that, a more consistent schedule that I could, have the family time for. And so, when I was doing biology, I thought biology was really interesting. The two great miracles in my mind were, how does the human body work and how does a computer work? Yeah. And I'd taken enough classes to kind of get an idea of how the body worked. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try this computer thing just to say I tried it. And I never looked back. It was just, the calling came at that point. Right. And I actually remember one day walking by a professor's office in the computer science department, and posted on the door there was like U.S. News top 10 jobs, and for that year it was like college professor and software engineer. Yeah. I was like, bingo. I'm just going to combine those two things together, and away we went. I think I'd mentioned also that I had done some teaching before that, and I really loved it. But Italian would be almost as crazy of a career to pursue as being a professional musician in terms of stability and being able to find a position that paid well enough and things like that. So teaching Italian was never a long-term option in my mind. But teaching computer science, that was much more realistic.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you said, a lot of interesting things in there, that we think about on a career services side all the time. One, you said you job shadowed, which is, essential, I think. But two, making, some of those kind of those life value kind of assessments. Being a physician will pay great and you're doing good work, but what do you want your days to be structured like? What do you want your weeks to be structured like? What do you want that balance to look like? And taking that really into consideration at like the same level as pay and doing good work. But then you said something else right after that, like you were never really, you were never really just drawn to it. Mm-hmm. So you're going towards it, but once you saw something that you're really taken by, and I think that's so important with, people going into being a doctor or being a teacher, something like that. Like there's these are the kind of positions that you should probably really feel like a very strong pull towards. And any position, like there should be something about it that's really drawing you, like in your heart, not just, on a paycheck or,
totally
what's the life balance, only the life balance, like having something else in there that draws you is pretty important, I think.
Yeah, it makes me think of, and I didn't come across this idea until I was well into my graduate studies, but you ever talk about the concept of ikigai?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The finding the overlap of what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs.
Mm-hmm.
I really feel like that sums it up. And when I look back at each of the turning points in finding my career, it was oftentimes I'd found something that I was good at and loved, but I couldn't get paid for. But there were other things that I was good at and could get paid for, but I didn't love.
Right.
And it was a matter of finding what was at the center of all of those things.
Yeah. Do you have any words of advice for career seekers out there, whether they're, students just kind of starting off or maybe even mid-career professionals thinking about a change?
I think one really important thing when it comes to making career decisions is don't make decisions out of fear. So often I see students that are afraid, that they want to be able to do computer science, for example, but they're afraid they're not going to be good enough. Or they're afraid that they won't be able to pass the classes, or that they'll, whatever it is. And so they make a decision to switch, not because they feel a calling to go somewhere else, or not because they love doing something else, but because they're afraid they're going to fail. I could see even people in mid-careers being afraid, like, well, I don't think we don't have the self-discipline to be able to go back to, student wages or whatever. All of those things are fear. I really feel like you only have one life. And to not pursue what it is you're passionate about, even if it means you might fail along the way and have to try again. It's not just you that's better for it. Everybody around you is better for you pursuing a career in whatever it is that you're passionate about. You will be more successful. You will help other people be more successful. So yeah, it's scary. It's hard, but have faith.
Well, thanks so much for coming in today,
Hey,
Paul.
my pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that was my conversation with Dr. Paul Bodily. I love what he said there at the end about not being led by fear. It is all too often that our fear of failure stifles us and holds it back. But as we've talked about so many times on the show, we grow so much from failure, and you'll never know what the rewards can be if you're making all your decisions based on fear. I also love when Paul talked about his two interests, one being to figure out the human body and one being to figure out how a computer worked. And now he teaches computers to be like humans. What an amazing confluence of interests. If you're interested in your confluence of interests, please visit the ISU Career Center website at isu.edu/career. Likewise, you can hear about many other professions and their path to get there on past episodes of Pathways available on Spotify, YouTube, and at kisu.org/pathways. Likewise, second Wednesday of each month at 7:30 p.m., catch Pathways live on the air on KISU FM. From Pathways and the Idaho State University Career Center, this is Mark Beaver, wishing you a fantastic